All right. So George, you've maybe found something. So when you're integrating with an existing system, so I want to make some upgrade, I want to make some change because I did my diligence on the part that we just. So upgrade in place, replace the whole solution, kind of how, what's your thought process?
Uh, I always like to go for the whole ball of wax if I can afford it, but
Yeah.
generally they're not in that situation. Uh, Looking back at my past, we had a lot of hospitals, some were 100 years old.
Wow.
That had very old equipment in it, old distribution system, old generators. Uh, the generator's 50, 60 years old, you need to replace it. So yeah, an advantage to upgrading in place, you can go in and replace that generator, do a small surgical strike. And the advantage of that is you reduce the cost. But then you're getting what you just paid for. If you're getting a replaced generator, that old electrical infrastructure is still there.
Yeah.
I guess another advantage of upgrading in place and reducing the scope, if you will, is you don't get into those code required upgrades. You don't get into things like segregation of branches, which is just a rabbit hole that sometimes just never, ever ends.
So you still your advantage. If I don't touch it, then I don't have to bring
If
it.
you don't touch it, you don't have to change it, but you're also somewhat doing a disservice to your hospital and your patients because someday you need to touch that.
Yeah.
Someday you need to replace that. If you think about it, most hospitals were built an addition at a time. Each addition had its generator.
Yeah.
Well, that generator is a single point of failure. So if you elect to go that route, you're now acquiescing to that situation. You're accepting that, and you're moving on with that. So there's pros and cons to each approach. Upgrading in place, you limit the number and complexity of shutdowns. So as I talked a few minutes ago, you're reducing that risk by doing that. But again, you're left with that single generator, that single point of failure, no redundancy. So if it's what you can afford, you've made an improvement. But you can also take that a step further. You can go with the, if you will, the power secure microgrid type solution. And you can supply generator power to the entire campus. I mentioned the 100-year-old hospital. There, we didn't have emergency power to the chiller plant. We didn't have emergency power to the imaging modalities, food services, things like that. All the things that you need to keep the hospital running under a sustained outage. But with this, if you take the traditional approach and install more transfer switches, more distribution panels, more load centers, hundreds of miles of wire, you're paying a cost for that. And you're essentially running wires to equipment that already has wires run to it.
Yep.
So if you can look at that microgrid-esque solution and what I've come to call that elegant connection from the generators back to the utility. After those generators fire up and serve the essential loads, after a few minutes, you do that medium voltage switching, and now you have power to the entire hospital.
Yep. You're
You're essentially an island on your own. You can survive on your own. So that to me, that's the biggest advantage to doing this. 12 years ago, when I crunched the numbers and I looked at the system that I originally had designed and ready to construct, it was about the same price to put my money into generation and not into rewiring something that was already wired.
Okay.
So that really, it helped me with finance.
Yeah.
It helped me with the C-suite, get that approved. The other thing that type of system does for you is it gives you N+1 redundancy. That single generator is not backed up. You lose that generator, you lose that building. So you have N+1 redundancy. Also with this scheme, you have common bus generation. So all your generators go to that bus. All your loads go to that bus. You lose a generator, it's hopefully transparent to you.
Yeah.
All those loads are still served. So I really like that solution. It served my former employer well. We have that system in 6 of 9 hospitals.
Okay.
And I've used them many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up very good points because wires already run out there. Why run new wires? It's very disruptive to the healthcare environment just to try to do that rewiring. So it makes sense. And then when you start to marry new and old, that's where technology can sometimes become a challenge with your old things that you may not be able to monitor very easily, but there's a lot of adaptability out there where in a lot of your manufacturers and things like that can bring in some monitoring that can go on to older gear to be able to monitor so that your engines can see what's actually happening on the load. So makes a lot of sense where if it's already wired and the wire's fine.
Why change? It seems silly, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Exactly.
So if I'm understanding that right, you're kind of suggesting that leave those old generators in place, the older solutions in place, but maybe have a whole facility type generator solution come in, and then you can maybe replace the old ones later because you're not having to rewire the entire facility to go with a whole facility.
That's not the approach that we took. I think Ron has that solution somewhere. But what we did, we replaced all those old generators with a generator farm, if you will, at the head end of the hospital.
All right.
More like a microgrid.
Yeah.
So they're wired in through the essential system. They come up to speed within 10 seconds. The red outlets and the emergency lights are energized within seconds.
Okay.
But then very gracefully, after a period of 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever you select, you make that, again, elegant connection at the medium voltage level back to where your incoming service is.
Right.
And now your entire hospital is electrified.
Okay.
You essentially become a third utility, if you will.
Exactly.
And that, it's a much more redundant system if you do that.
Yeah.
In some cases, it makes more sense. I have one facility that has an older generator on it, and it's a small generator, and it basically takes care of one air conditioning, select life safety circuits out there, a few critical circuits, and that's it. But during a long-term power outage, we have a lot of problems. So we jump into the utility on the medium volt side, bring a generator on. So that first generator only has to start and run for 15 minutes or so, and the second generator is up and online. You're locked in with the utility, and the whole building has normal power, and nobody knows what's really going on other than that initial first blink. So.
It's interesting. As I always did, I would walk around the hospital during a power failure and ask the nurses sitting there, how's things going? You have everything you need? Well, yeah, power came back on 15 minutes ago. Well, I'm sorry, it didn't. That's a generator supplying that power. You just think everything's normal.
Right, exactly.
I'm providing you power in 15 minutes to the utility.
That's it. Right.
One thing that's not, a lot of people are not aware of is that the grid is going to become more and more stressed, especially in Florida. I noticed we have Kevin Hinton from Duke Energy on the call this morning. It's no secret why demand response down here is getting a lot of play. When you're talking about, I think it's $8.11 per kW, just for the promise to run those generators, ROI looks pretty good. But Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, they are aware that more people are moving into this area. And I was driving from Orlando to Tampa the other day, and it looks like one city. There's buildings everywhere you look, most of them distribution centers for Walmart and Amazon, for instance. The grid is more vulnerable now than it's ever been. And I think people are beginning to realize that the EPA takes a back seat when it comes to emergency power. We'll see what happens. But I think that's on Trump's agenda to address that. But one of the things that George brought up a while ago about the having multiple sets for backing up. A lot of people think that if you've got multiple sets, you don't need to have a connection point for a portable generator in case one of those generators goes out. That's false. If you look at 700.4F, I think is the number, it states specifically that you need to have one. But let's say that you decided not to, and you've got your distribution planned so that all the generators that you've got are needed to supply all the loads. And if you lose one, it starts shedding loads. Well, when you start shedding loads, you got to remember that you have load creep that exists in every facility. People are adding loads on. So you got to keep a real good eye on just exactly how much power it's going to take to keep all